It is such a wonderful pleasure to have everyone here on this call tonight. My name is Uri Cohen. I'm the executive director of the Slifka Center for Jewish Life, normally located at 80 Wall Street across from Salon College. But tonight in your living room or wherever you happen to be, rather extraordinary circumstances these are, as I'm sure everyone is aware. This is kind of a first for us, at least in recent times. We had originally scheduled this program to be of a more a local event in one particular area. We were fortunate to have a number of the founders of the Slifka Center, which opened in 1995, with us on this call this evening. And this event was originally going to be for them, and then the world totally flipped upside down on us. And at first we figured we couldn't go ahead because gathering people together wasn't a good idea. And then we thought, well, let's try it online. Let's see if there is if people will come, if it's a good medium, if it's a way of engaging people, and it's really wonderful. We had a very large number of RSVPs, many more than we could have fit in the Stearns apartment. So I want to thank everyone for being here. This comes at a funny moment in time. One piece is that Slifka Center is celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, and part of the rationale for gathering the founders, which again was the original intent around this program, was to celebrate and to engage people in thinking about 25 years of the Slifka Center and a capital campaign that we're currently running for a major renovation of the dining hall and the kitchen. That was sort of where we started, and that campaign is of course ongoing with the opportunity for Yale credit through June of next year. And then the world changed, and here we are sitting in our living rooms and not able to gather and focused on important things like family and health. I hope that we can all make the most of these opportunities. And I most of all wish everyone to be safe and healthy and practice good social distancing and wash your hands a lot and all of those things that we've been hearing. Things are pretty serious around my neck of the woods, and we want to flatten the curve and all of that stuff. So please do your best, and I'm wishing you and your families all the best of health and sanity as well. This session is being recorded, so please be aware of that. I'm really thrilled that we have not only original founders of the Slifka Center, but also many alumni, parents, current students. We even have some committed members of the class of 2024. So welcome to Yale, Yale faculty and staff, lots of other folks who are here. We're hoping that this is the first of what will be a number of increasing ways that we can connect as a community and through Jewish life as a particular lens through the Slifka Center. And so if you've got ideas for how we might do that, or feedback on this session, please get in touch with Jennifer Wallace. Her information was all over the emails you may have received to RSVP to this. Reach out to me, reach out to Jen. We'd love to hear from you. I really want to also thank Dean Marvin Chun, who will be introduced in just a moment, for taking the time to be with us today and for sharing thoughts that are both timely and also, we're going to, in some ways, suspend disbelief and talk about something other than the coronavirus. But I imagine he'll make some comments about that as well. I want to take this opportunity to thank Jeff and Susie Stern, Steve Sussman, and David Slifka, who have really helped us to organize this evening. We have tonight Jeffrey Stern, who's class of 1970 and a past member of the Slifka board, and his wife Susie. They're the parents of Michael, who's a class of 2002 and a current board member. Jeff has had a distinguished New York City career in finance, and he and Susie have made time for leading roles with UJA Federation of New York, Jewish Federations of North America, and the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, where Susie is on the executive committee and was also nominated by President Barack Obama to serve as the chair of the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. We're going to hear a little bit from Jeff in a little while. But first, I want to introduce another critical member of tonight's team and one of the founders of the Slifka Center as well, Steve Sussman, class of 1962. He's the father of Harry, class of 91, in Yale College, and Stacy, class of 91 at the School of Public Health. Steve is the founder of Houston-based Sussman Godfrey, one of the country's top litigation firms, and is also the executive director of the Civil Jury Project at NYU Law School. Steve and his family have been long involved in many efforts to promote social justice, supporting scientific research and promoting the arts, including at the Yale Art Gallery. And at this point, I'll hand the evening over to Steve. I will say a few words and introduce Dean Chun.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Yuri, and thanks everyone for being with us tonight under these circumstances. It's a pleasure for me to be involved in a program that celebrates the 25th anniversary of a home for all Jewish students at Yale. When I arrived at Yale, a public high school graduate from Houston, Texas, a Reformed Jew in 1958, I went to the Hillel office on the old campus and quickly realized that there was nothing on the Yale campus where I felt at home and welcome. That was that might have been understandable at the time when there was a quota. I got in despite the 10% quota. But in any event, when I was asked to support the Slifka Center, which was to be a home for all Jewish, a place for all Jewish students at Yale, regardless of their flavor, could go and celebrate in their method of celebrating. I thought it was a terrific idea, and it has been a terrific idea for 25 years. I understand that every Friday night there are hundreds of students that come to Slifka Center to have dinner, and every time I've been there, it's full. It's a pleasure tonight to introduce Dr. Marvin Chun, who is the Richard M. Colgate Professor of Psychology and Professor of Neuroscience. He is the Dean of Yale College. He will provide us some remarks to answer some of our questions. Dr. Chun became the Dean of Yale College in 2017. He holds undergraduate and master's degrees from a university in South Korea and a doctorate from MIT. Aside from his short stint away from Yale when he taught at Vanderbilt, Dean Chun has taught at Yale since 1996, receiving broad acclaim as a teacher, colleague, and scientist. He uses his research uses functional MRIs to study attention, memory, and decision making. And in 2017, he led the initiative to offer an undergraduate major in neuroscience. Beyond academics, Dean Chun served as the head of Berkeley College from 2007 to 2016, preparing for his never more challenging role than the one he is in now, overseeing undergraduate life and curriculum. In recent weeks, Dean Chun has been at the center of the university's response to COVID-19, especially to students and their families, in reshaping student programming, in dealing. He is the first Asian American to serve as the Dean of Yale College, and he and his wife are parents of 2 children, including a current Yale undergraduate. I hope Dean Chun talks about how Yale is dealing with this crisis, how Yale is dealing and will deal with the prejudice and that arises from this crisis, from trying to blame this crisis on Asians or Chinese. And so, Dean Chun, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's a huge honor to be here. I'm really excited and thankful to be a part of what should be a completely celebratory year honoring the 25th anniversary of the Slifka Center. It is truly a home not just for our many Jewish students, but it has been a truly welcoming place for all Yale College students. The Slifka Center is, well known all around campus as being incredibly welcoming, inclusive, fun, peaceful, nurturing, just all what we want for in a community center on campus. I think the Slifka Center has proven to be a beacon, a leading example. It is what all communities on Yale at Yale strive to be like. And when we talk about thinking about promoting and nurturing new communities, we talk about, oh, we want to be like the Slifka Center. And that's something that I view as a kind of a role model for campus. And I'm grateful to the Slifka Center leadership. Of course, I'm grateful to its many founders and supporters. And I understand that so many of you are on this call behind the screens on this Zoom screen. Again, I really regret I'm not able to meet with you in person, but I'm grateful that we're able to meet this way remotely. And I'm happy to share a few remarks about the situation at Yale. And we also left plenty of time to receive your questions. But first and foremost, I want to wish you all, I hope that you are all doing well, that your family members are doing well in this unprecedented challenge and situation. And that hopefully we can have an hour here where we can come together and remind each other of the power and warmth of our Yale connections and community. I'll first talk about the COVID-19 response, since that is the primary reason why we're doing this online. I have to say that everything that Yale is designed to be, everything that Yale is about, which is being a strong community and having a campus that promotes community, having a campus and activities that maximize social interaction, and learning from each other, and being with each other, and celebrating with each other. All that works completely against what is being advised as a public health measure in terms of social distancing. So the challenges were enormous once it became clear that isolation and social distancing was the best and most immediately required response to stem the outbreak and to flatten the curve, as I'm sure, as you've heard in many occasions. It became super apparent that our residential college system was going to be, worse than any cruise ship. That it would be a total incubator for propagating and for the epidemic to worsen. And so it was, once we've made that determination and it was clear that cases were rising in the United States, we had to make a quick determination to basically vacate campus, decrowd the campus as much as possible. And that the only way we could do that was to send students home, a decision that we did not make lightly at all, but was absolutely necessary based on public health, to protect the public health and community health. All experts were telling us that we had to send students home. And for this, I have to say that I'm extremely, the the residential college system, the heads, the deans, all the staff who support the residential college system, normally promoting very healthy, positive social interactions, that really also went into motion to basically send thousands of students home as quickly and as safely as possible. And that was basically the entirety of spring break, where we had to commit ourselves to do that. I'm super grateful and proud to be a member of the Yale community and Yale University, because I have to say that that being able to send students home so abruptly is going to come at quite a great cost, because we had to help pay for the travel of students going home. And in addition, we needed to make a quick about giving them refunds for the remainder of their room and board, so that especially our low-income students could rely on that to support their living expenses, no matter where they had to go. And then to be able to house about 150 students now. At the time it was 200, now it's about 150. Some students don't have a home to go to, and either because they're from a very rural or disadvantaged country or neighborhood or home environment. So we are also housing over 100 students in the residential colleges in this context. So all of that required a lot of logistical work, and it required a lot of money. And I feel very fortunate to be at a place where the president, the provost, and all of my colleagues just really chipped in, stepped up, and just made everything happy, so that people can either be in a safe place home or on a safe place on campus. That has been our #1 response to COVID-19. And I feel that we've been relatively successful in making that possible. Our priorities now, of course, is to make sure that remote learning, which will be in effect from now until the end of semester. After spring, students return from spring break to classes. They restarted yesterday, and so for 5 weeks plus finals period, students will be engaging in remote learning, and my entire focus has been on making sure that could be as successful as possible. And in addition to allow for additional academic accommodations, so that no student would suffer any grade disadvantages because of this remote learning mode in which they have to engage with their studies. And so, but as I hope you can tell through this Zoom call, the platform is working pretty well, and I'm hearing relatively positive reports about how Zoom learning is going. Obviously, nothing replaces an in-person interactions with your classmates and with the teacher. However, this Zoom platform, especially for classes under 25, where everyone would fit on the same screen, seems to be working okay. And I will have to credit the Purvu Center for Teaching and Learning for making all the preparations necessary to make this remote learning possible. So that's kind of the summary of COVID, our response to COVID-19. And I'm happy to answer questions you may have about that. But I will now turn to some comments I would like to make about our Belonging at Yale initiatives, and in particular, in the context of too much horrible hatred, prejudice, bias happening outside in the world around us. And I think I've already started by hinting that Yale is very much a haven from the ugliness that is out there in the external world. We are a community that is very inclusive, and students are quite respectful of each other, and they are very, very mindful of each other's well-being and supportive of each other's well-being. In fact, this is what I think people miss the most with this remote learning and being scattered around the world, is that they just truly miss being able to hang out with each other and spending time with each other, because that I think is one of the greatest sources of joy and happiness of being on campus, is the community and being amongst each other, and again, learning from each other. We truly do come together for each other, both in good times or bad. Certainly the loss of April is going to be have big impact, because as you may remember, those of you who are alumni, April is a time where a lot of clubs do their activities, dance shows, singing shows, a lot of athletic activities, it's when you do all your capstone presentations for your senior projects. Cultural centers have a lot of end of year activities. And of course, importantly for the graduating seniors, it is a time to really kind of reinforce and celebrate the bonds that you formed, the friendships that you formed across your 4 years at Yale. And so we really do feel bad for our students, in particular our class of 2020, for the disruption that this COVID-19 outbreak has caused to their experience. But we are a place that really comes for each other in both good times and bad, and as some examples as it relates to how we respond to hatred out there in the world. In 2018, when the horrible synagogue shooting happened in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life, the community came together in numbering in the hundreds on the old campus in front of the women's table to hold a vigil for the victims and their families and the congregation members, the synagogue members, again, to support each other and to show our collective sorrow at what had happened there. And I was at that vigil, of course, and it really was members from all over the community gathered there to honor the lives that were lost and to support those amongst us who were more closely connected with the victims and members of the Pittsburgh synagogue community, as well as the broader Jewish community. And that was just, I think, just one example of how we really come together for each other. There have not been incidents, to my best knowledge, there have not been public incidents of anti-Semitism on campus, except for two that I will note in recent years. One was 2014 graffiti, chalking of the swastika, anti-Semitic graffiti on Elm Street in front of Durfee's and near the Women's Center. And the response to that, I encourage you to look online, was that a large number of students came around and chalked supportive messages of love and support all around that graffiti, basically overwhelming it with an outpouring of love, support, and positivity, with the phrase that my predecessor, Dean Jonathan Holloway, had put out to campus, saying that there is no room for hate in this house. So I think the community responded very powerfully to that. The perpetrator was not found. They were not able to catch the person who did that. In October 2019, around the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you may be, of course, I'm sure you're aware that there was also anti-Semitic graffiti in front of the law school, swastika and the word Trump. Of course, the university condemnation of that was swift and very public. It's just basically something that we do not condone. We condemn it. We condemn racism. We condemn bigotry. We have zero tolerance for such discrimination, and symbols of hate have no place on our campus, according to Dean Heather Gerken of the law school and also President Peter Salovey of Yale University. In that case, the perpetrators were caught and they are being charged for hate crime and vandalism. And importantly, as we think is probably the case for other forms of graffiti and vandalism, the perpetrators were not members of the Yale community. So these are external attacks on our community values. But at least, there is some comfort in that these were not members of our own community who were committing these acts. It doesn't make it less awful, obviously, but it helps us direct, it helps us understand what happened and find ways to address it. That said, very much so, anti-Semitism is rising, prejudice is rising, bias, all of that hatred, hate crimes are all on the rise around us. And it is a deeply troubling trend that we feel that all Yale community members need to be able to address and to help lessen in our roles and in our, I think in our future as future leaders in the case of our students. And to help promote our students to become citizens and leaders that can set a better tone for society of tolerance and inclusion and respect. We have an initiative, the Belonging Initiative, that is being led by our Secretary of the University and Vice President, Kim Goff-Cruz. And the goal of this Belonging Initiative is to foster a more diverse, inclusive, and welcoming campus for all our students, staff, and faculty. It is to instill a sense of belonging. It is to establish clear lines of leadership and administrative support. The president, President Salave, has appointed a presidential committee on diversity, inclusion, and belonging, again, with the goal to create a campus-wide culture of inclusion and belonging. This committee meets with student leaders, focus groups, cultural centers. It also, Chaplain Sharon Kugler is an important member on this committee, and she leads Interfaith Forum and Interfaith Council, with whom the presidential committee will collaborate with and work to create a campus that is very warm and welcoming and tolerant. They're also hiring an associate vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, who could focus on civil rights protections. We need someone who can really kind of be the focal person to address incidents of discrimination and harassment, and also to set up discrimination and harassment resources, policies, and response procedures, including communications and educational programming. That person will also officially oversee the Office of Institutional Equity and Access, and another big charge of this Belonging Initiative, in which I'm directly involved, is to promote viewpoint diversity, which is basically the idea that we want our students and our community as a whole to be a place where everyone can hear, listen to, and respect viewpoints that are different from one's own. We think that this is essential for future citizenship and leadership, and it's a key component of the Belonging Initiative, of which Yale College, and in my role as dean, I'm directly playing a role in promoting. So these are the kind of the outline remarks that I've prepared to hopefully prompt questions, and I believe our next segment will be an opportunity for me to take and try to answer the questions that you have. So thank you for your attention. I know it's a little hard to watch someone on a screen, but I do appreciate your attentiveness.
Hey, this is Jason Rubenstein here. We're going to transition to Q&A in just a second. I think the Stearns are going to lead that transition.
Muted. Shift Command A. I'm now unmuted. Thank you, Dean Chung. I think all of us would agree that we're extremely fortunate to have you leading Yale College. On behalf of my wife, Susie, we really echo Steve's comments earlier about how important it is to have a strong, safe, secure Jewish community at Yale and on all college campuses. And this has never been more important than it is now in the current unsettled environment. And we're going to be talking about that more. It's now my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Jacob Rubenstein, who is the Howard M. Holtzman Jewish Chaplain at Yale, and he's going to act as the moderator for tonight's Q&A session. Just a bit of background, Rabbi Jason is part of the Slifka Center leadership team, along with the center's executive director, Uri Cohen, who opened the program. Both Uri and Rabbi Jason came to Slifka Center 2 years ago in 2018 and are completing their second year. It's hard to believe that Slifka Center opened 25 years ago in 1990, and as Steve said, has served as a spiritual and physical home for Jewish life on Yale campus. Just a bit of background, Rabbi Rubenstein was brought up in Washington, D.C., received his BA from Harvard. Fortunately, he got the light. He met his wife there and now mother to their children at Harvard Hillel. He later studied in Israel and received an MA in Talmud and his rabbinic ordination at JTS here in New York. For 8 years before coming to Yale, Rabbi Jason helped develop and provide vibrant and egalitarian Jewish education and programming at the Upper West Side's Yeshivat Hadar. At Slifka Center, his intellectual and spiritual gifts are now shared with Yale undergraduates and the Jewish community across the campus and cross-culturally as well, developing relationships and programming with graduate schools, faculty, staff, and other nonprofit organizations in New Haven. So it's a pleasure to turn it over to Rabbi Jason.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for that introduction. You can see me on my phone here. Those aforementioned children in my wife, Ariel, are doing bedtime. So in order to keep it the likely scenario of any noise filtering through, I'm not going to be on speaker here. I want to open with a word of appreciation for everyone who's on this call, and then particularly for Dean Chun, and then to moderate your questions, so we can really have a dialogue here in the kind of deep Jewish spirit of collaboration. I'm sending in the chat window my email address, which you can use to email me questions, or you can just chat them privately using the internal Zoom function. We're in, as Uri said in opening, and Dean Chun reiterated, just a moment that almost no Americans, at least those of us who have lived here our whole lives, really have experience to draw on, and maybe even our parents or grandparents didn't, of how one acts in this moment. And as we approach the holiday of Passover, one of the most remarkable things is that the kind of reigning academic theory of the Seder in the last 2 generations is that the Passover Seder was developed, the one that we have it in practice for coming up on 2 millennia, was developed as a reaction, as a consolation after the destruction of the temple in the year 70, the high point of the year in the temple. This season of April, like Dean Chun mentioned, when so many great things happen, was the pilgrimage, the gathering, the celebration over the Passover sacrifice. And it was the inability, the sudden and tragic and scary inability of people to come together, which led to this kind of ferment of creativity, among other things, and created really the Judaism that we have and live. And so I think the hope is that actually, this gathering, which would have been a couple dozen, has grown to 5-6 times that size, is in the same vein, really, that we actually will, by force of will, by a sense of urgent need and a sense of possibility, find ways of coming together, just like this call, that this will be really one piece of a much larger knitting together of this community dispersed across space and across time, going all the way back to the founders. And then for Dean Chun, I want to say, the role of a chaplain is well defined as a religious figure who operates in a much larger institutional context, an army chaplain, a prison chaplain, a hospital chaplain. And because of that, what you can do and how you do it are enabled and impacted so deeply by the institution you're in, and really by the people who lead that institution. And I want to say before this crowd that I just cannot say enough appreciation for Dean Chun's leadership, the way you showed up right there after the Tree of Life shooting physically during the vigil by sending a beautiful card, by being present at Slifka Friday night when we had our own small gathering, the way you're on this call right now, even as you're managing an incredibly complicated set of administrative and personal and financial and ethical processes, which are not what the college is built to do. And you're taking the structure that you've led and really making it mobile and putting student safety and health first, but without sacrificing any more of their education than we absolutely need to. So I want to thank you for creating this space in which the Jewish community operates, in which Uri and I in the Slifka Center operate, and just say how important and how foundational your vision is. So I want to start by reminding everyone, and someone actually pinged this as a question, I think it was Steve, Dean Chun, you're not just a dean, you're also a professor of psychology. And, there's a lighter, I want to just really ask how you bring that depth of training and research and teaching to this context. There's a lighter version and a deeper version, and I would love you to speak to both. The lighter version, I saw on your website that your research uses fMRIs to, among other things, determine whether people are attentive or distracted, and really fundamentally perceive the human face. And I think as we're on Zoom right now, we're all relying more than usual on our facial perception, and have a little bit more concern, perhaps rightfully so, that the people we're quote unquote talking to are distracted, maybe on other browser tabs. So first, you can just speak to the perceptual dimensions of what we're experiencing, and then on a deeper level, as Steve wrote, how you think about this, not just the academic and not just if that's up here on Maslow's hierarchy, and not just the kind of basic safety and financial well-being down here, but kind of in the middle, the social well-being, the ability to create bonds, the ability to create connection across distance, how you see our psychology presenting challenges and opportunities in this distinct moment.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really grateful and happy to be here. I'll try to answer the questions concisely so that we can get through a lot of them. But basically, my background as a psychologist and as a neuroscientist, I feel has been very helpful in my role as dean, partly because I think I have a very genuine and deep appreciation for individuality, and the fact that people are very different from each other. It's just something that is very apparent when I study the brain and I study how it supports behavior. And also as a psychologist, I definitely, I feel I have an extra appreciation for the power of community and social interaction. And that even actually intersects with my core area of study, which is attention and distraction. And one of the things we know from my area of study is that the most important hold or fixture or stimulus, if I may use a scientific term, for holding someone's attention is actually social interaction. It's another person's face. It's a conversation with another person live. And whenever you deprive the cues of that, either by putting them on a flat screen or over the phone, and then certainly even worse, over just over text, then the ability to really engage with each other and to stay focused on each other and to be intentional really drops. Our brains have just not evolved to really handle that mode of communication. It's better than not having that type of communication, but live in-person interaction is really key for social interaction, and also just for people keeping people engaged and helping them do the best in any context. The only other thing I'll add in my role as a psychologist is that we really understand the power of groups over individuals. In fact, in my welcoming speech for incoming first-year students for the class of 2023, I talked about something known as collective intelligence. And I really actually, throughout this process of responding to COVID-19, I really found the power of collective intelligence. We've had Zoom meetings with colleagues all around campus on pretty much every issue you can imagine. And always the best ideas come from multiple places, not from any one individual, not from the individual with most power or the individual with the most information. And so I think this whole crisis has really highlighted the importance of community. And just in closing, I'll say this is why the in-campus experience is so important.
Wow, it's very moving, and just the power of maintaining that vision right now for the whole college is great, and it's one that we feel from the students really appreciate. So I'm getting three kinds of buckets of questions right now. The first is about COVID-19 and myriad ones here, and since you started with it, I want to kind of just continue in this vein, and then after this we will pivot to the regularly scheduled programming. And specifically, the Bildners sent in this fascinating question. Their son-in-law, Dr. Benjamin Goldman, Israel, is an infectious disease fellow at Yale and actually involved in research on COVID-19. And we're taking that really as a window into what, can you tell us what Yale is doing on the scientific front? I heard an NPR interview with Yale faculty when I was driving to the grocery store last Thursday night. Just tell us kind of where in the world of ideas and policy and science the university is right now, and what kind of how that fits in with the larger push towards STEM.
Yes, absolutely. I feel very fortunate, and I think we're all very fortunate to be affiliated with Yale, which with all its professional schools, including the medical school, the School of Public Health, the School of Nursing, are definitely on the scientific front line of both trying to limit the outbreak, trying to predict its progression, trying to recommend policies that will limit its progression and spread. Of course, we're on the front line of developing right now the race towards developing a vaccine and cures for COVID-19, and that ranges from very, very specialized molecular work to direct work on developing the vaccines, and then but not just that, because I think a lot of schools have these have medical schools and such, but I'm really proud to be a part of a community that has expertise in all areas that are relevant. We have policy experts, we have law scholars, we have ethicists, we have one of the world's leading scholars on social networks and how both disease and information spreads across social networks. This is Nicholas Christakis, and I would encourage folks, if you're not already a subscriber to Yale Today, which is a daily newsletter that Yale News sends out. It just started about 3 months ago, so not everyone may be on it. But if you Google Yale News, there will be a way to subscribe to Yale. And pretty much every day you're going to see some article about a Yale researcher or research team tackling some aspect of this COVID-19 pandemic. And it just, I think it's very inspiring and certainly a big priority for the universe to support researchers and colleagues.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So I want to pivot now from COVID-19 to the question of anti-Semitism by I guess kind of a sadly powerful connection between the two. I'm going to share in the chat window here a link to an op-ed that was co-written by Andrew Yang, the former presidential candidate, and Jonathan Rosenblatt, the executive director of the Anti-Defamation League. And its point was about trying to raise up a voice of protest against the anti-Asian racism of labeling this virus, continuing to label this virus a Chinese virus. And I think it raises major questions. The Jewish community always is kind of has very sensitive antennae to hatred. And to put this in a slightly broader context of the college, Ori and I started last year, and were extremely moved, in really, a matter of months after we started, to see on the order, I think it was about 400 people really representing every group, and texts and emails and visits, not just from individuals, but from different groups at Yale who stood in solidarity with the Jewish community after the Tree of Life shooting. And then really tragically, we had the obligation really to return that goodwill. And then the shooting, it was shooting in Sri Lanka, and the Christchurch massacre, and kind of again and again over last year to find various groups kind of targeted. And if there was a silver lining there, it was the ways that we built relationships amongst each other. And this actually feels like another chapter in that story in some ways. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to, personally and in terms of your position of leadership in this Belonging at Yale initiative, how you kind of see this linkage that Yang and Rosenblatt have made between some of the, rhetoric around white supremacy and language around the virus and contemporary incidents we're hearing about against violence against Asian Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that this is you're a brilliant moderator, because the way you phrased the question almost, I think, answered it. Again, the connections are there, and they're deeply concerning. And fortunately, I think I am, when I read about it, I'm also reading lots of op-eds about how problematic it is to call the COVID-19 a Chinese virus, and how this kind of language and habits connect and propagate and worsen prejudice and hatred around this country. They trigger, they enable, and they empower in a bad way these horrible attitudes, and they license them in a way that I think we should all be alarmed by, and we should really push back against. So I guess I don't have too much more to add to that, except just to reinforce your point that again, fortunately, what we can do here at Yale, at least proximally, in addition to what we should be doing out there in the world, is that fortunately this is one of those things that I don't feel I have to be a leader at Yale, because the community members themselves, the groups themselves, self-organize to support each other. I think it's in our DNA. I think it's in our in how we are, in our culture, and for that I feel that that DNA, that culture at Yale is very strong, and I do think it's something that we've inherited to our former classes and leaders, and I can just say that it truly is strong, and it's something I'm very proud of at Yale.
Wow. Can you speak to how the interplay between that kind of profound culture of tolerance, viewpoint diversity, and I want to make sure the question is sensed that there is a kind of rap circulating. I hear it often from older alumni that it's not safe to be conservative as a student. It's certainly not safe to announce that you've voted or may vote again for Donald Trump. And so how I feel the strong potential of a certain tension between what you were just saying and a strong viewpoint diversity, and I would love to hear how those two work together or sometimes against each other in your work and thinking.
That's right. So I do think that differences in culture, differences in religion, most types of differences, I think, are very well supported and respected on campus. I do agree that when it comes to political ideology, just literally that of conservatism versus liberalism, I do think that is an area where there is sensitivity, and there's work that we can do and need to do to promote better dialogue along that dimension. So again, I think along all the other dimensions, other kinds of differences, students, faculty are very, very respectful and supportive. But along the political ideology dimension, I would agree that some differences there aren't as openly debated as we would like them to be, such that conservative students, politically conservative students, do feel a little less comfortable speaking their views. And that's exactly something that my committee that's aiming to promote better conversation across differences as part of the Belonging Initiative. One of the big goals of my committee is to really kind of almost focus our energies on promoting better conversations along a political ideology continuum.
Wow, could you share, I know that's very, very much in its early stages, but would you be willing to share some of the viewpoints that have been raised, the projects, the models you're working off of? I just think it's such an exciting thing to be able to see the early stages of what will become part of the culture at Yale, a few years down the road.
Yeah. I think our best strategy will be to actually literally model and demonstrate good examples of fierce debates happening around common topics from completely opposite, from different viewpoints. And so I'll give an example. One of the biggest debates on campus right now concerns whether Yale should divest from fossil fuel industry, from the fossil fuel industries or not. Again, the backdrop of this is that most everyone agrees that climate change is an existential crisis that we must all try to address and reverse. But people differ in whether they think that fossil fuel divestment is a strategy for that, or whether we should focus our energies on other ways to combat climate change. And so the Faculty of Arts and Faculty of Arts and Sciences Senate, which is a group of faculty members who are elected by their peers to help provide opinions and direct and guidance on various campus matters, they sponsored a forum in which they had students and faculty from different viewpoints gather together, each giving them very structured time to articulate their views, and also articulated time, they articulated time to have Q&A. And it was really one of the most constructive conversations that I've ever seen. It was not softened in any way. There was no sugarcoating, but it was done with a tone of respectful disagreement. And I think the more, and based on that, I've also had more conversations with folks who have these different views on that matter. And so I feel we need to have more of those. And this can be on a range of topics. Right now, we're having a debate on whether Yale should make all grades pass-fail in response to the challenges that some students have in engaging in remote learning. There's one camp that's arguing that we should do something called universal pass-fail, so pass-fail for everybody, or something called optional pass-fail, which is what the academic accommodations that I announced last Friday, which I personally think, at least time, retains individual student choice and respects their differences and different needs and different circumstances the most. But there's intense debate over that, and I'm going to spend the next week trying to find ways to channel that debate into a constructive forum.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's wow. Okay, so this is amazing. The modal question that I've received, it's the most popular, I think somewhere between 3 and 4 people, I'm losing track between the chat and the email, have asked me, I don't even want to paraphrase because I might get myself into trouble, so I'm going to just read a couple of them. This is Jeffrey Stern's formulation on the chat window. There have been troubling incidents on many campuses where Jewish students are being excluded from progressive organizations. If they're Jewish, they must support Israel and therefore are considered oppressors. Jeffrey asks, has that happened at Yale with any groups? Then I see Leslie Harris seconded that question to me. She wrote me a private chat to that effect. And just to get all the voices out here, another question came in from Jessica. Are you aware of possibly more subtle forms of anti-Semitism on Yale's campus? How should students think about and react to them? 2 forms my daughter has experienced in the college. 1, a litmus test on being opposed to Israel before being allowed to join a social justice organization. And 2, the professor of her Middle East course not fully capturing the complexity of the Israel-Palestine conflict, but conveying that she's totally unbiased. So if we were to, I want to kind of frame this in I guess, if we were to put things in, the most kind of simplistic categories, if before we were talking about like some kind of anti-Semitism of the right, this is very much talking about what many students experience as an anti-Semitism on the left. And I want to share that this is something that I and Uri and I share many conversations with students who have just this experience in groups, the Progressive Party and the Yale College Democrats, to the point where they feel like Israel is the one topic that their groups cannot discuss. They're simply incapable of having the type of rational adult give and take that you described.
Yeah, and I think that aligns with what I mentioned as an area where we have work to do, which is I think anything that aligns along that can be aligned along this continuum of liberal versus conservative views, then I do think that there are campus groups and just students in general who have difficulties respecting other viewpoints or actually inviting. I think it shouldn't just be about respecting, but I think any group should be proactively inviting viewpoints that may differ from their own. And that may differ from the group, because that's the only way that we can really learn from each other. And I think it's really what's most consistent with the higher educational values and mission of our university. So I am very sorry when I hear about these anecdotes, especially of implicit racism, implicit bias. Those are definitely harder to measure, but of course it doesn't mean that they're not there, and it doesn't mean that they're not affecting the lives and well-being of our students and affecting our mission. So I am grateful to hear about these examples, and I do think that for my committee on promoting conversations across differences, definitely one arm should be in partnership with you and with the Slifka Center, so that we can address that head on.
Well, I really appreciate that invitation. It's a conversation to be honored to be part of. I want to come back to the theme you introduced about the power of groups over individuals, and ask you about a specific example that came up this fall. I don't know whether you're at the climate strike, right? For folks who are not familiar with this phenomenon, in the fall there was a strike, I think it was a Friday, where students across the world walked out of classes, and many at Yale did also, and there were speakers. And one of the moments that really has kind of stuck with me is a student who was very involved in Slifka, who was also very involved in the climate strike, talked about kind of her heart sinking when the kind of connected to this. Puerto Rican debt relief is often connected for a variety of reasons. And then there was a speaker who was kind of raising the chant of "from Puerto Rico to Palestine." And the student felt like they are standing in that group required a certain kind of compromise of who they fundamentally are, and it was really the power of the group, I think, that was at stake. And so I would just love to hear, that space is so different than a classroom, right? And how you think about the formation of those kinds of groups that are, really can't be about reasoned debate, because they're about getting something done, and what happens what are the pluses and minuses really of having that kind of an energy on campus?
Yes, and I was at that rally, although I did not hear that chant or that call. What I try to say with students is that, of course, they're students. There is value and a need to protest very publicly and in very visible ways, because that's one way to get public attention. But what I really also try to tell students is that if they really want to find solutions, then it's best to also make sure you come to a room in a conversation at a table with someone who has different views from yourself and be engaged in conversation. That protest alone is not effective enough. And you really just have to be in conversation, debate even with someone, especially someone who is in a position to affect the kind of change that they're calling for. So in the case of the divestment issue, I basically put the students in conversation with David Swenson, who's running our endowment. And they appreciated that, to get to that point, they had to demonstrate that they were able to engage in productive dialogue and listening. And once they had demonstrated that, I did host that meeting with David Swenson.
Wow.
And the same thing will go, I think, for any issue. That yes, public protest is, what people feel they need to do, but it should be coupled with some private dialogue.
Wow, that's a very powerful kind of image of the university on some level, or the college, as holding both of those modes of reasoned, just like kind of conversation across disagreement, and then activism. That those two they almost need each other in a certain way, even as they're in a fairly profound tension. Wow. So, wow, we've covered just an incredible array of topics. I want to say it's amazing how you managed to kind of convey so much thought in each very measured in time answer. I want to ask a question which has always been personally important to me, and someone sent it to me over email. It was Eli who did that. The question was about the sense of music. How does music foster a sense of community and spiritual elevation in the undergraduate experience is a question. And I think it really follows in a lot of ways on what we were talking about, the ways that these different modalities of Yale, obviously the classroom is at the center, but it's very close in, not on the margins, are the arts. And it took me most of my first year to begrudgingly admit that there are not just a few, but many things that are the experience of Yale undergrads, actually especially, is superior to that of Harvard undergrads. And one of them that I keep coming back to, in addition to the devotion of the faculty to teaching, is the centrality of the arts, and particularly music and theater at Yale, which is pretty rare, certainly in elite research universities. And so I just wanted to ask, as you kind of think about the spiritual climate of campus, spiritual in the broadest sense, as Chaplain Kugler often likes to say, for people of all and no religion, how you see, what resources you see the university as providing and students as creating, including, as Eli asked, music.
Yes, I really thank you for noting that. And it really is one of the areas in which I think Yale distinguishes itself from our many distinguished peers, is our strength in the arts and our value and emphasis on the arts. I think it goes back to what we said earlier about the importance of social interaction. Almost by definition, the production and performance and enjoyment of arts is best done as a social activity. It's really standing out now in this COVID-19 April of an area that's being most heavily directly disrupted, together with athletics. There are just certain human activities that really celebrate each other, celebrate performance, celebrate creativity, that has been greatly compromised by this. That is really hard to replicate over a distance, and certainly over Zoom. Again, it really is a glue and a focal point for what makes Yale community strong. And it is something that I'm missing a lot, even as I tell people that this remote learning is going okay.
Right. Wow, it's very poignant being able to really hold hold that loss. So here's the last question I want to ask. We want to, people love being invited to, generally given a soapbox to prognosticate about the future. And that's what I'm about to hand to you. There have been a pair of questions, one about thinking not just about the seniors who didn't expect, this loss and the peak end effect. It's particularly poignant of their last time. Also the class of 2024 with cancellation of Bulldog Days, what impact you see on their time. And, we're looking years into the future. And Bob Schloss also sent an interesting question. Are any Yale faculty or graduate students planning longitudinal studies comparing the life paths that are, so fundamentally affected and altered and redirected by this? I remember my wife was class of 07, and there's a lot of research there about how the classes of 07 and 08 versus 09 with the financial crisis did so differently. So really, I guess the question is looking ahead, 5, 10, 15, 25 years, if you had to right now, what are the predictions you would want to make about the effects on Yale, on higher education, on students? Or what are the questions you would want people to be asking right now?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question, and I think it's a great question to end this conversation, to close on. And I guess what I will try to say is that I'm writing a list of these questions. What impact does this have on their bonds with each other, with their just transition in the case of class 2024? What impact will this have on their transition to Yale? For seniors, what impact will this have on their strength as a alumni community? What impact will this have on their jobs and the kinds of careers that they partake? These are all questions that I plan to track, and of course I know that many of my colleagues will study more rigorously and with better expertise. With that said, I want to write down a whole list of these questions. I hope we're saving the chat box for questions that people may have.
I'm going to screenshot it before we go.
Yes, I think there's a way to save it. But the reason I ask, because right now, if you ask me what is consuming me moment to moment, day to day, is to do everything in my power as dean in the role that I have to minimize any long-term impact of this disruption on our current students, but more importantly, even on their futures. It's what gets me up. It's really what keeps me going. It's the adrenaline that's making me work as hard as I can, because my top priority next to what we need to do for public safety is to minimize the disruption this will have on our students. What's happening this April is happening, but I don't want there to be a long-term effect of this disruption on them, at least certainly no negative long-term effect. I only want there to be a positive effect.
Wow. What a moving confession, really. And I want to thank you in the midst of that, really, in the in this storm, which isn't showing no sign of abating, taking some of your time and mental energy and heart, really, to share with us over this evening, as you have so often over the past year and a half. I can't express my own gratitude and that of the whole community enough. I want to turn things over now to Uri Cohen, just to give the heartiest of thank yous to Dean Chun, and Uri will take us through the end of the evening.
Okay, so thank you, Jason. And I really want to thank you again, Dean Chun, for spending the time with us, for sharing your wisdom with us and your vision with us. And we were really fortunate to be a part of the team that we hope will work with you in creating an environment for students that will help to minimize all of this. I also really want to thank Rabbi Jason for facilitating. It's wonderful to have you as a partner in crime, and also to Steve and to Jeff for their leadership and tonight and always. I also really want to thank Jen Wallace and Evan Wexler, members of our team who have managed the invitation and technology aspects of tonight, which are super important for tonight to be successful. Two quick comments. Dean Chun mentioned how being a part is so antithetical to Yale's ethos and purpose. And the same can certainly be said of the Jewish community, and especially with the Passover holiday coming, when people are used to be gathering with family, and now sadly will be so far apart. And we're so proud to be a part of the Yale community and striving for that goal of community as a whole. As always in life, we have to prioritize. And at this specific moment, we have to think of and help those who are in need, protect the vulnerable. We have to be doing that first to the greatest extent that we can help. Once this crisis moment passes, we'll need to shift our thinking to providing antidotes, not to the virus itself, but rather to the social distancing we've been forced to embrace. As Marvin mentioned, Slifka Center plays an important role in creating Yale's best kind of community, but in a uniquely Jewish way that serves the entire campus community. At Slifka Center, we see our own approaches to fighting anti-Semitism in terms of defense and offense. Defense means the concrete and metal and glass that we use to keep those who wish to hurt us outside. Offense is how we teach people to love us, bring them inside, and this involves a day-to-day conversations, interactions, and literally breaking bread together, especially in our dining hall. Both defense and offense require a strong, secure, and healthy facility that gathers community as its core function. I mentioned in my opening the capital campaign that we're running in honor of the 25th anniversary. And I want to reiterate that this once-in-a-generation opportunity to help support Yale and Slifka at the same time by considering Slifka Center in your reunion, class, and capital campaign giving plans to Yale between now and June 2021. For now, please stay safe, and please share your feedback with us, and we look forward to seeing you on another one of these Slifka online salons in the coming weeks and in other opportunities. Thanks, and have a great night.